What's up guys, and welcome to a pretty exciting video. Jedi Survivor drops in 2 days, but I've actually had full access to the game for just over a week now thanks to EA, and I have now completed the game. So in this video we're going to go over my thoughts, an early review of sorts, completely spoiler free of course, so don't worry. My full spoiler review will come out in probably like a week or two, so it gives you guys a chance to finish the game. Now, I'm going to get into the good, the bad, and the ugly, so you guys know what you're in for. But before I do want to mention that I will be giving away copies of Jedi Survivor for any platform. So if you do want to win yourself a copy of Survivor, then these are the details. Number 1, subscribe to my clips channel as I will be choosing a winner from over there. Number 2, follow my Twitter as that is where all the winners will be announced. And number 3, like and comment your favorite Star Wars character on my pinned tweet. That's it. That's all you've got to do to be in the running to win a copy of Survivor for yourself. And there is going to be multiple winners and they're going to be announced in a few days' time. But anyway, let's dive into this video. So most of you know I did play the game for about 4 hours back in March at the capture event in LA where we got to play on Kobo, the main hub planet of the game. And my thoughts off the back of that were very positive. My only issue with my original playtime in LA was that there were some FPS drops. Everything else was virtually perfect and a big step up from Fallen Order. Now, having completed Jedi Survivor, what are my thoughts? Well, pretty much the same as my thoughts after LA, except times it by 10. So I'll touch on the frame rate thing first, as that's the main negative I have about Survivor performance. I did get hit with some pretty noticeable frame rate drops, but it is worth highlighting that I did play a pre-release build of the game, and these were known issues. So a lot of the performance issues that I ran into are being addressed for launch as far as I know. Most of the time it was fine though, but there were probably half a dozen moments where it did get pretty bad, but it seemed to go away just as quick as it came, most of the time. So that's about the only major negative I have on the game. Everything else is pretty spot on the money. Jedi Survivor is a massive step up from Fallen Order in most aspects. There are some areas that I think Fallen Order still does it maybe a little bit better, and I'll get into those later, but I'd say about 90% of things Survivor is just far superior. Now let's not speak in broad terms, let's try and get into specifics without spoiling, obviously. So I'm going to touch on the story, again, without spoilers, don't worry, I want to make that very clear. Now this is in the trailers and the game synopsis, but the game takes place 5 years after Fallen Order. Cal is more powerful, rugged, and still being pursued endlessly by the Empire. But it's getting harder and harder to stay alive and rebel against the Empire. Cal comes across something that could mean an escape from the Empire's grasp once and for all, and it ties into our friend in the Bacta tank. Now the Mantis crew are all off doing their own thing when we begin the game. The last 5 years has been pretty tough on them all, but this thing that Cal finds to help escape the Empire unites them along the way, and the story takes flight from there. That's about as much as I can give you on the story in specific terms. Now, what are my thoughts after playing through the entire story? Well, I'm not gonna lie, just over halfway through the game, I think I would have said I actually preferred the story of Fallen Order. But then I got to the last 6 or so hours of Survivor, and I think it's a better story than 99% of the movies or shows Disney have put out over the past 10 years. I distinctly remember getting about 2/3 of the way into the game and I was like, this story is good, but I think I actually still prefer Fallen Orders. But then the final act of the game got underway and it completely blew me away. Now, I'm not a very emotive person, but I genuinely had my jaw on my desk for the final act of this game. Like, I was audibly making noises without even being able to control myself. The final act of the game just had its teeth in me just that much. So that's the best way I can describe this story without spoiling it. The story took a lot of twists, a lot of turns, it got surprisingly emotional, and definitely fleshed out Cal even further and took him to places that I never thought they'd go with him. Now, what about characters? Bacta boy, was he good? Was he bad? What's the deal? I thought he was a really interesting character, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of him. I'd say he gets about as much screen time as Trilla in Fallen Order, but this game is longer. And given how interesting the character was, I was always wanting to just get back to him and see where things go. Now, there are some interesting parallels in the story between Cal and Bacta boy that I found really compelling as I got deeper into the story. I think he's going to be a bit of a fan favorite character. As for Ravis, the near indestructible chunky boy from the trailers, he was pretty cool too. I wouldn't have him on the same level as a Trilla or a Malakos from the first game, but he was still a really enjoyable villain with a code that gave his character a little something to latch onto. As for the rest of the Mantis crew, they're all in the trailers. Ciri's off doing her own thing, and I thought she was a little underutilized until she wasn't. I'll leave it at that. Grease is also back. Greasy money, baby. They give him a lot more to do in the game in terms of actually having weight for his character. He's still got the jokes that we love and, you know, sometimes has no filter, but when the time comes to be serious, he's got a lot more nuance to his character, and I really liked that. As for Merrin, she's back and she's awesome just like in the first game, and the way she tied into the companion combat aspect of the game was incredible and made for some of the coolest sequences in the game. Speaking of companion combat, Bode Acuna, the character we see Cal teaming up with in the trailers, this dude ended up being a standout character. I really liked him. He gets a lot to do. There's a lot going on with this character, and yeah, when you play the game, you'll see why he was a standout. Now let's talk combat, boss fights, lightsabers, all that fun stuff. The combat is maybe the major standout of the game. I finished it and I still feel like I only just scratched the surface of the combat. Granted, I did rush through the story in certain places because I wanted to be done when the embargo dropped, so I didn't get to spend the time upgrading all 5 stances. I dabbled in all of them, but I mainly used dual wield and blaster stance, and this is probably the first you're seeing of the blaster stance, and it's pretty damn good. It's a lot of fun to use, and I mean, I used it through pretty much my entire playthrough. Now, I can't show you the full extent of it, as by the time I had all the skills for it unlocked, I was in the end game, and I can't show you any end game stuff just yet, plus I wouldn't want to spoil you anyway. But the gameplay is just so in depth compared to Fallen Order. If you want to know how good the gameplay is in Survivor, just know I got stuck on a boss for about 2 hours and died probably 30 times, and I had fun every single time and wasn't even mad that I kept dying, because it just meant that I could just keep doing the boss fight. Like, they were that enjoyable. They didn't feel like a chore, and some of them were actually really tough. Now, if I was to nitpick, I didn't really enjoy the crossguard stance all that much. It's probably much more of a personal preference thing more than anything, but it's a very slow way of approaching combat, and I just think it didn't really click with my playstyle, so I didn't use it all that much. But it was nice being able to approach boss fights and actually having to think about how you approach it. Do you go short range? Do you go long range? What perks do you equip? So the game makes you think. It doesn't just spell it all out for you, it lets you make decisions on how you approach the combat. As for Cal's force abilities, they get pretty wild in Survivor with force abilities. Cal can do some pretty insane stuff, not just combat related, but with traversing the world, and you can chain together abilities when traversing the world that are actually really satisfying to pull off. Speaking of traversing the world, let's talk planets, exploration, all that good stuff. We'll touch on Kobo first, as that's the biggest planet in the game by far. I knew this planet was big, but I didn't realize just how big. It's actually absurd how big Kobo is. It just keeps going. It's of course got tunnels, buildings, ships, and they seem to just sprawl on forever, and the fast travel feature, like, yeah, you need it here. Fast travel being in this game is such a major improvement on Fallen Order, and I might have actually lost my mind without it. As for the other planets, I won't spoil the full planet roster for you. They're all different. They've all got their unique quirks that make them fun to explore. We do see Coruscant in the trailers, and exploring Coruscant was as awesome as you'd expect. I do wish we got a little bit more to do there though. It didn't take me an overly long time to explore most of it. Like, you can definitely tell that most of the time went into Kobo, because all the planets we go to except for one are relatively small. Like Bogano sort of size from the first game, but I don't know, maybe a little bit bigger. But the sand planet that you see in the trailers, that one is pretty damn big as well, and the best sequences of the game in my opinion took place there, so yeah, strap in. The planets in this game overall, they're no slouches. They're really fun to explore. Some of them are really big, some of them are a little more contained. You do explore quite a few locations in Survivor, more than Fallen Order for sure. Like, the game is massive, I can't stress that enough. And exploring is way more rewarding than the first game. There's tons of cosmetics to collect, force echoes, and goodies of that nature that aid in leveling Cal up. So the reward for exploration is absolutely there. I will say though, I personally rocked the mullet and handlebars for the entire game, and I don't regret a damn thing. It was glorious. It was so funny, you'd have a super serious cutscene and the camera would just cut to Cal and you'd just see this, and I love it. Now I know a lot of people are going to ask questions about the map. It is still very similar to the first game, but it is refined. It is easier to use, and I found myself using it way more than I did in Fallen Order. You're probably going to find overall you're going to use BD1 a lot more than you did in the first game, which is also really cool. But yeah, all in all, Survivor has done what a sequel should do. Take what worked from the first game and build on it. It is a better game than Fallen Order. Some of the things it falls short on compared to its predecessor lie within heavy spoiler territory, so that'll be in a video at a later date. But if you're a Star Wars fan, this game is just a must. End of story. It's one of the best Star Wars stories to come from the Disney era easily. The character work is excellent, the gameplay is fun, in-depth and satisfying, and the story takes some twists and turns that will have your jaw on the floor. Respawn have well and truly knocked it out of the park again, and they've topped their already great predecessor, and this is one of the best Star Wars games ever made. So guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you subscribe to the channel, as this is just the beginning of the Spicy Survivor content. Remember to enter the giveaway by following these 3 steps. Drop a like on the video if you're hyped for Survivor, and I'll talk to you all very, very soon.